welcome back to another live bonus episode of the DCL Duo podcast brought to you by My Path Unwinding Travel. And because this is a live bonus episode, we are also brought to you by WDW Magazine, as well as the DCL Magazine. That is going to be a thing very, very soon. For those of you who haven't heard us mention, if you want to get on their waitlist for an edition or to join their subscription for the DCL Magazine, go to wdw-magazine.com and add yourself to their waitlist. Additionally, if you want to buy anything at their store, use code word DCL Duo, all capitalized, and you will get 10% off all the merchandise in their store. But welcome. I've got to say Happy New Year before I, of course, introduce my lovely guest who's joining me today since my co-host is unavailable. But Happy New Year to everyone. It is 2025. This is our first show of the new year, and Tracy's representing with a DCL Happy New Year necklace. Well, I got to welcome my fabulous guest, Tracy, to the show. Those of you out there, you all know her at this point, right? She's actually, we figured out, I think she's been on, this is like her 9th time on the show, maybe. Yeah, 9 times on the show.
Yeah.
And Tracy and her husband, Michael, are affectionately known as the DCL Duo Senior. If you haven't listened to previous episodes with them, make sure to do so. They are just a fun, lovable couple. We met them back in 2019 on the 11-night Southern Caribbean on the Disney Fantasy. And isn't it funny, Tracy, that we are going full circle?
Yep.
Back to the Disney Fantasy. Yeah. And Brian is commenting on YouTube that Tracy took over our Instagram and did a fabulous job. For those of you who didn't follow our Instagram over the past week when we were on the Fantasy, Tracy was kind enough to volunteer to do a takeover of our Instagram. And despite the fact that I violated the agreement to not post some reels,
at least 5 or 6 times.
Yeah, I definitely posted some reels during that time, but Tracy was the one who was posting all of our stories and many posts and most of the reels that got posted over that week. So we're back, obviously. Tracy's back in Ohio. I am back in Washington. Washington State, not Washington, D.C., for those who care about the difference. But and we just got back from like a whirlwind trip. Both myself and Brian, and of course, Nathan was with us, Tracy and her husband, Michael, as well as another family. You've heard us refer to them before. They are the Morrill family. They have a handle on Instagram. They are Cruising DCL Family. And so they were posting as well. But we all went on this whirlwind of a trip. It was a couple days at parks, staying at Riviera. Down in Walt Disney World. We went on the Treasure Maiden Voyage. You obviously all heard the show that Brian and I did, the live show we did from the Space Hotel. Tracy's wearing the treasure ears. And then right after that, we pivoted. As Michael coined this term, instead of doing a back-to-back, we did a pivot. Because we had one day in between. We got off of the Treasure at Port Canaveral, went to the Space Hotel, went to the Kennedy Space Center for the day, and then the very next day we boarded the Disney Fantasy out of Port Canaveral. So it was it was pretty amazing. Long trip. I see Craig is saying you did way better at going dark than he corrected himself. Way better at going dark than I thought you would, Sam. Thank you, Craig. I appreciate that. I know I tried my best, but I had a hard time doing that. We've got a lot of people saying hi. We've got Linda saying, hey, DCL fam. We've got Lindsay saying Happy New Year. We've got Bridget complimenting your ears.
Aren't they gorgeous?
Tracy, yeah. And then we've got Lori saying, looking forward to the show. Hope you got to see our favorite soul duo. They were on the ship. I heard them. I did not sit and listen to them very long, Lori, because they weren't in the lounges that we were hanging out in as much. But I did see them on board, and they were fantastic. A couple of times I did catch a song or two. And of course, we've got CT wishing us a happy new year as well. There's
no comments, CT, about the fact that I had chocolate souffle twice on this trip.
Love it. And we got Linda saying she's excited to hear about our trip. She loved the Fantasy in July and missed the cruise so much. We've got Sarah's complimenting your
Oh, thanks, Sarah.
program, and we've got Ashley saying Happy New Year, and Karen saying not a bad way to celebrate the holidays. It sure flew by. I knew it's definitely very, very fast. And CT saying he may be a brunch sweet roll convert. Oh my goodness. I don't know what
What?
roll that you're talking about. If it's the sticky bun, I don't know. Anyway, well,
Hmm.
let's jump in. Tonight we're going to talk about the cruise on the Fantasy, but we're not just going to talk about the cruise on the Fantasy. We're going to talk about it in context with having just been on the Treasure, because it obviously these are two very different ships. They were built at very different times. They have different layouts. There's different activities. So we want to kind of do a little bit of a compare. But before we do the compare and whatnot, we do want to talk about New Year's Eve and what it's like to sail on New Year's Eve on Disney Cruise Line. There is, I think, fair consistency across the fleet as to what kinds of things you can expect if you're celebrating New Year's. I want to put this out there because I know there's questions about this. New Year's Eve cruises are not maritime cruises. So they don't have a maritime deck party. They generally won't have Santa on them. And that's because Christmas and New Year's are 7 days apart. And none of the cruises that we have seen yet have been encompassing both Christmas and New Year's. So maritime cruises typically end as soon as Christmas ends. And so New Year's cruises are not maritime cruises. So unless DCL does some really long cruise over Christmas that happens to go Christmas and New Year's, you won't have maritime. That doesn't mean, we discovered, that you won't have a Christmas tree or decorations.
Christmas
Tracy.
tree or the gingerbread house or
Yeah.
the garland or even some of the holiday attire.
Yes. And Castaway, Tracy, right?
Oh, that's right. Castaway had their decorations were still up as well when we got there. So, and that was
Yeah.
the end of our cruise. So that was, that was the fourth.
Yeah. So we
So,
had, just to put this out there, I mentioned on our last show on the Treasure Maiden Voyage, there was a lot of chatter about whether or not we're going to have Christmas decorations on the Treasure for Christmas because it wasn't a maritime cruise. If you didn't watch that show or listen to that show, spoiler, there were decorations, as we knew there would be, even though people were adamant that there wouldn't be. So there were decorations. And actually, the decorations on the Treasure we saw through posts on Facebook and Instagram, they continued all the way through their New Year's
mhm.
cruise as well, which started and ended a day before ours. So both on the Treasure and on the Fantasy, I haven't seen if this is true on the other ships, Christmas decorations stayed up through their New Year's Eve cruises. And of course, Castaway Key, they also, all the decorations were up at least until January 4th. But I can also report, though, the Christmas decorations came down off the Fantasy on January 5th, because as we were debarking, we saw the tree was already down and the garlands were being removed.
And the
So
gingerbread house was gone.
was gone. Yeah, they must have done that at
Gone.
night because we did not see it get taken down, but it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't there. There are folks saying, this is the first time they've seen the decorations up past Christmas. I think that it is unusual. There have been other times where Castaway decorations have been up past Christmas. There have been, but it's pretty rare, I think, for them to be on the ship past Christmas.
I'd be curious to have Michael chime in because we've done two other New Year's cruises, one with our kids when they were littler and then one a couple years ago. And I think the trees were still up on those as well.
Yeah, yeah.
But maybe Michael could chime in, and he's just upstairs.
Well, and Linda was saying we got Christmas Castaway on a non-Christmas cruise. Both of our cruises, right? Technically, both the Treasure Maiden and the Fantasy New Year's Eve, neither of them were maritime. And she went on a maritime cruise on the Fantasy. Maybe it wasn't on the Fantasy. I mean, it was on the Magic. She went on one of the earlier maritime cruises, and the decorations were not yet up at Castaway.
Wow.
And Michael is saying in the comments he can't remember, Tracy. So,
Okay.
well, let's talk about New Year's on Disney Cruise Line. If you are going on a Disney Cruise Line vacation during New Year's Eve as a part of your itinerary, typically speaking, you are going to have a New Year's celebration on board. In fact, you might actually have 2 New Year's celebrations on board. And if Tracy happens to be traveling with you, then you'll also have a birthday celebration to celebrate on board, because Tracy is one of those lucky or unlucky people whose birthday happens to be December 31st. And so you get to celebrate her birthday on New Year's Eve. Well, we had 2 celebrations. Let's start with talking about the first one. Setting aside your birthday. I guess we had 3 celebrations. But setting aside your birthday, Tracy, let's talk about New Year's Eve. We had a different menu in our dining room. Let's talk about that for a second. What did we have, Tracy?
Oh, you're gonna ask me about the menu? Jeez, I don't
Well,
remember.
it was
I mean,
like it
I
was
definitely have
similar.
comments about the menus, but
Yeah.
I, you know, I feel
It was
like it
it was
was,
similar to the Christmas menu.
yeah,
I'll
I was
put
gonna
it
say,
out
it's like
there.
the Christmas menu.
It wasn't exactly the same as the Christmas menu, because we did have, I believe we had a filet mignon on there that isn't on the Christmas menu. But there was, I think, like a turkey
A
dinner,
turkey.
and yeah,
Yeah,
there
turkey
so
with mashed sweet potatoes.
yeah, so
Um,
we had like the traditional, so we didn't have a pirate menu because we had a 7-night cruise where we had the, rotational dining, twice, at each restaurant, and then an extra night at one of the restaurants. We had our extra night at Royal Court, but of course the menu was the same across all of the, restaurants. So it was a special New Year's Eve menu. Like I said, not exactly the same as a Christmas menu, but similar. It was a porcini crusted filet, to be exact. Craig is reminding me. Thank you. I appreciate that. So that was a kind of a nice touch. There was a toast during dinner
right,
that
captains
came with
came
the
on the loudspeaker, and then there were
yeah.
there were officers in each one of the restaurants doing a toast.
Yeah. And then there were 2 countdowns. Tracy, why don't you tell folks about the first of the 2 countdowns?
Okay, so in the atrium, they had a countdown. They had all the characters came out. They had a little dance party thing going on, and then they did a countdown for those people who can't tell time. You know, little younger people, maybe somebody wanted to get their kids to bed a little early. And
Yeah.
so the countdown was, I believe it was 8 p.m. if I remember correctly,
Yeah.
because it was before our dinner. And so it was a nice little party. They did have drinks. They had champagne and drinks that the waiters were carrying around, so you could grab one of those to, do a toast or whatever. But it was a lot of fun. The characters were all there, so it was a lot of families at this one. Not that there weren't at the deck party as well, but a lot of little people,
Yes.
that were there. And the characters were just kind of mingling amongst people, dancing and having a great time. And so then they did the countdown. The captain came out on the balcony and on the fourth floor, I
Yeah, it
think.
was 4th or 5th floor, I can't remember.
Yeah,
We were down on the in the atrium on the 3rd
atrium
floor, and
floor.
then there were people watching from the 4th and the 5th. One character kept going on sort of the stairs and, like, doing, like, kind of a solo dance, and then the rest of the characters were, as Tracy mentioned, mingling with the crowd. But then, yeah, the countdown was the cruise director, the captain, and then Mickey and Minnie went up there, and so they did the countdown. I think they counted down from about 20 seconds. I have a
Yep.
video of it on our Instagram. And then of course the confetti popped out. And so this was at 8 p.m. So it went from about 7:30 to 8 p.m. It was crazy in the atrium because it was
Oh,
also picture time, right? So it was
yeah.
like the 7:15 picture time was happening. And of course there were free drinks and character dance parties. So of course it
It was
was
chaos. It was
yeah, it
pure
was.
chaos. And it was just, because it was New Year's Eve, I think a lot of families had the idea of, we're going to get dressed up and we're going to go do pictures, not
Yeah.
really understanding that this party was, going to be chaos. And I felt terrible. There was a family in front of us that had a little one who was just like, she looked so cute. She was just done. And mom was just like, I just want one
One
nice
picture.
picture of our family all dressed up.
Yes.
The
Well, and
photographers, they worked so hard.
They did, and they made the nice one thing I thought that was really nice is they actually originally had put out a schedule of when formal night was gonna be, and then they changed it, and so formal night ended up being on New Year's Eve,
Year's
which
Eve.
was perfect because everyone was gonna dress up for New Year's Eve anyway, and so you saw a lot of, like, sequins, a lot of sparkles, both in, like, kids and adults. The men tended to be a little bit more dressed up on this night in particular as well. While, of course, on Disney Cruise Line, for those who know or those not in the know, you don't ever have to dress up except if you're going to Apollo and Remy, the adult only, or Enchante, the adult only restaurants on board. Every place else, and even there, it's fairly casual, but every place else on Disney Cruise Line is casual wear at a minimum, but you can, of course, dress nicer. And so all of the formal and semi-formal nights that they have are all optional. They are not required, but on New Year's Eve, it seemed like, I don't know, almost everyone was at least dressed nicer, if not n
Yes.
I nobody I did see a couple of, like, sequin gowns and some tuxedos,
Mhm.
but generally speaking, that those people were, like, on the overdressed end. I felt like a lot of people were doing, like, cocktail dresses,
Yeah,
skirts, blouses, polo shirts, short sleeve button downs, that
yeah.
sort of a thing, yeah. Okay, well, then we had after dinner, we had an evening deck party that started at about 11 p.m., was a whole hour long, we were all tired, but we all stayed up. Should say that Nathan actually stayed up for the deck party. Um
And then promptly told me that my birthday was over.
That's true, true story, I love that. The deck party was very similar to the atrium party, only,
Yeah.
of course, outside. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention about the inside atrium party, but also the deck party, is that they actually had, little carts where they were selling, like, bubble wands and
Oh,
light
that's
up
right.
wands and
Mhm.
stuff, so
I've
just
seen
like
that
you
on
see
the
at the
deck
parks.
before, but never
Yes.
indoors.
Same, same. And maybe indoors, they might not have been selling the bubble ones, but they were selling the light up stuff
Yeah, the
indoors,
spinny things.
and the spinny light up stuff, and or the light up wands and whatnot. The same, very similar or the same to what you see in the parks, but they were selling them and the bubble wands on the deck at the
Yeah,
New Year's Eve party. At the New Year's Eve party, they did hand out those the necklace that you just showed
yeah,
a little bit ago. It was a bead necklace with a Happy New Year. They did come around with little petit fours, little, like, bite appetizers. They
yeah.
actually had a lot of them. I felt like the waiters were going around and having a hard time actually giving them away, probably because it was 11 o'clock at night and most of us really weren't that hungry. Um,
Right.
and then, of course, they came out with these really nice like
Champagne flute,
Corksicle, yeah,
basically.
Corksicle champagne flutes, so, like, the insulated, like, metal ones that said, Disney Cruise Line, Happy New Year 2025, something like
Yep,
that. And so they handed those out. They had, ones with, what I believe was Cloudum or Martinelli's for the kids, and then, of course, probably Prosecco, not actually champagne, for the
yeah,
adults, and you knew which ones were non-alcoholic by if they had a straw in them. Yeah. And then
yeah,
it was more of a dance party. I mean, I feel like we had a hard time seeing because we were so far back, but from my
right,
memory, Tracy, was just kind of music with the characters doing different dances until
right.
the countdown started.
Yep, and then if I remember right, the captain's, like, voice came on, like, I don't did he maybe they came out on the stage.
I know that the cruise director, Steven, I know he
That's right,
came
Steve
out on the
was there.
stage. I think the captain came out on the stage, but he might have just been over the loudspeakers. Hard to actually see them,
Yeah,
but because they were on the stage or whoever, including the characters, we could only see the tops of the heads of the characters and
exactly.
Steven, the top of Steven's head. And at the beginning, they were up on the monitor, so we could watch everything that was going on stage from the monitor. But then when they switched to the countdown, which was at like a minute, I wanna say, then
Yeah,
all you could see was the countdown on the screen, and then they showed the countdown, and then, of course, when we hit, like, I think it was, again, like, 15, that's when everybody started actually counting aloud, and then, "Happy New Year," and then what was in the sky, Tracy?
fireworks for my birthday.
Fireworks for Tracy's birthday. Well, no, it wasn't your birthday anymore.
I
The
know, that's right.
fireworks hit.
Nathan
It
told
was
me, "Your birthday's over."
your birthday's over. So this is really nice. I will say that if you're sailing certain locations, New Year's Eve, you might not be able to have
Right.
fireworks, but if you're sailing in the Caribbean or the Bahamas on New Year's Eve, you will typically have 2 fireworks shows. If it's more than like a 3-night cruise, if it's a 3-night cruise, you just have the New Year's one, you might not have a pirate one. But we have had a pirate fireworks on
Yeah.
a different night, and we had the New Year's Eve fireworks. Um, and Linda's asking, were we close enough to see the Dream and Wish? No, because they were in the Bahamas and we were still in the Eastern Caribbean, so they were not
Yes,
close
we were
enough.
between were we in Puerto Rico?
We were
Was that the day or we were in St. Martin? I can't no,
No, we
St.
were in
Thomas.
Puerto no, Puerto Rico,
That
San
was yeah,
Juan.
wrong cruise. I'm sorry. 2 cruises,
I
all
know,
important. I'm getting them
I
all
know.
mixed up now.
Yeah, so we went to San Juan we went to St. Martin first, and
Martin
then we
and
went
then
to
St. Martin.
San Juan, but I believe it was San Juan night that was oh, no, San Juan was the 2nd. No, it was a sea day, it was sea day.
Was it
So
sea
anyway,
day?
we were headed to the Eastern Caribbean, so
We were
we
in the
were
middle of
not.
the ocean somewhere.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, she's saying, "Did I see that the Dream and Wish were close enough to one another to see each other's fireworks?"
Oh,
I did
no, I didn't
not see
see
that,
that.
Linda. That makes more sense. Sorry,
Yeah,
I did not understand the question. That's really cool because that makes sense
that
because they
would be
would have
fun.
they would have both been probably close-ish to Nassau in the Bahamas.
I will say that when we were watching the fireworks and we were looking out, like, as we were, like, looking out over the edge, you could see all the other ships out in the ocean that park and wait to watch our fireworks, so
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, super fun. And they pretend like some of the other cruise lines pretend like, "Oh, look, we made fireworks for you out in the distance." No, no, those are Disney fireworks.
that's right.
Anyway, so that's what New Year's Eve is like on the Fantasy. It's similar on the other ships. They do these fireworks shows for New Year's Eve if they can. Was a really fun way to celebrate New Year's Eve. It was really nice to have a different menu also instead of having. We were lucky we didn't get a pirate night menu on either of these cruises because we had a Christmas menu and a New Year's Eve menu. So yeah, Tracy's given 2 thumbs up for that. I'll echo
You know
that.
how much I love the pirate
Yeah,
menu? Not.
yeah. Well, let's transition to talking about the fantasy in a more general sense. I know, Tracy, you had a lot of opinions, hot takes, I should say, about things on fantasy that need to maybe be updated. So let's start there because I wanna first put it out there. We had a wonderful time on the fantasy. She's got
Yes.
amazing spaces, but she is due for dry dock later this year. She's going in for dry dock in, I believe, end of September. And so there's some stuff that probably needs to be updated, or there's some just places where she could use a little bit of paint. And you noticed some things, Tracy, when you were on. And why don't you why don't you start there?
Okay. Well, so first of all, comparing the Treasure, which is brand spanking new,
Yes.
to the Fantasy, which is the only ship left in the fleet that hasn't been in dry dock, that's, of the original 4 ships. We were kind of, we had kind of discussed it even before we gotten on the Fantasy, like, what, how are we going to feel about this? I will say overall, I still love whatever ship I'm with, with my whole chest, like, but there were things that I saw. I'll start with our stateroom. It would just like the bed was still perfectly comfortable.
Yeah.
But there were things, the carpet looks a little worn, the couch is a little worn, the oval table that doesn't fit under the couch like it does on the Treasure, which is super annoying because I'm constantly running into it. The top of it was kind of all scratched up, like
Yeah.
just little,
Just like little
nothing that,
yeah, mostly soft goods, I feel like
yeah,
they are like it's like what they do with the DVC resorts, right? Like every few years they need like an updated soft goods refurbish, right? And so fantasy similarly needs that as
yeah,
well. Yeah.
she just it wasn't anything that impacted our stay. It didn't impact us in our room or anywhere else on the ship per se. It was just you just know, like, especially because we just came off the Treasure. I just noticed it. I was like, "Oh, that table looks a little rough. It's seen better days." That'll be in cast connection before we know it.
Yep. Well, and I think the pool deck was another area, in particular the lounge chairs. So the lounge chairs, we sat on them a lot on the adult pool deck, and the cushion for it was, again, not like, they looked fine, but
Right.
my butt would start hurting every time I'd be sitting on them because there's, like, no cushion in the cushion anymore, like, the cushion's so broken,
Yep.
broke down, and so even though it looks fine, it was like, you could tell, like, I'm hoping that's, something that they update. And then, yeah, there's, so Lindsay's jumping in here too, there's carpet, right? She
Mhm.
noticed she was on the cruise right before us, she noticed the carpet, or 2 right before us. She noticed the carpet on the midship stairs was more worn than the after the forward stairs. Not really noticeable, but noticeable if you went on all the stairs. These are the kinds of things, and Vanessa's saying she was on the Magic in 2013 before its major dry dock. They could tell that, what was going to be updated. Definitely. And especially when you look at, like, brand new carpet on the Treasure, to your point, Tracy, and all the amazing, beautiful carpets, and there's an amazing, beautiful carpets on the Fantasy as well, but it's one of those things where they're older now, and so, you can tell there's definitely going to be some updates there. There's a couple of things, like, we know Enchanted Garden on the Dream didn't have the chafing dishes, the buffet area that wasn't removed, and it's on the Fantasy too, and it's just a wasted space, like, it could be, I mean, they could put even a little stage there, they could do something with that space, and they haven't done, so there's some things like that that I feel like are, the room for opportunity. And then I feel like we should talk a little bit about menu, Tracy, because
Okay.
those menus haven't changed in a really long time, and I'm wondering
Yeah.
what you think about those,
Like,
the menu, and I know what you think about them, but I feel like you should share maybe some of your
Well,
thoughts.
so in full disclosure, I'm an incredibly picky eater. I'm very sheltered. I'm a very Midwest girl. I like my, beef and mashed potato kind of thing. And one of the things that we had talked about at our dinner table each night as I looked at the menu and tried to find something that would fit into my into my belly was that we kind of feel like, first of all, the menus are just repeated over and over again. It's just like the same. Like, I feel like there's so much opportunity for them to change things up and they just haven't done it. But the other thing is that it's like they're trying too hard. And I'm stealing that from my husband because he said that while we were on the ship. He's like, it's like Disney's trying too hard. Like, do a really good XYZ, whatever. Like, do a really good red snapper or do a really good fillet, but you don't have to make it like like something out of Victoria and Albert's,
Right.
with all the things and the sauces and all the things on it, just like a really good steak,
Yeah.
or really, and so for me, what I would love to see is something a bit more casual. Like, it doesn't have to be like McDonald's, like, it doesn't have to be pool deck food, but something that's, and yeah, I could get the lighter fare and just get the plain grill. I want it somewhere between the lighter fare and what they're doing right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Something in
So
between
some
there.
sauce, some accoutrement, but maybe not as fancy. See, and I don't know that it's too fancy for me. I don't think it's too fancy, but I do think that we could use a refresh on some of the older menus. In particular, the night 2 menu
Oh,
in
yeah.
all 3 of the main restaurants on the Fantasy is the weaker of the 2 menus, in my opinion. They're not None of them are really bad, but
There's nothing special.
there's not a whole lot of special on those night 2 menus, and so it'd be nice to see them maybe refresh them. I actually think they did such a wonderful job on the menus on the Treasure,
Yes.
in not just in, 1923, well, actually 1923, I don't like the second night menu as much, but I actually really like the second night Marvel menu. I thought they did a great job with
Mhm.
that, and of course, both Coco menus. Now those are very themed for Mexican,
Right.
but it would be nice to kind of, I don't know, maybe just do a little refresh.
Well, they with the cocoa menu, they could, they could have gone way over the top with that as well, but they didn't. That was what I liked about cocoa, was it kind of was almost like they scaled that back just a little. Not it's not Taco Bell, it's not Chipotle at Sea.
Yeah,
It's a little bit more than that, but it's not like crazy, all the things. I mean, the chicken enchiladas and the empanadas and the pork carnitas, that was amazing. And
yeah,
there were choices. And the Disney's big miss on the Treasure, say it with me, Sam,
yeah.
no queso.
Okay, so yeah, that's right.
What?
I
What?
know, I know. Well, we have a couple of good comments I wanna bring up.
Okay.
Sarah saying she feels like the sauces aren't actually that fancy, but they sound fancy, but they really don't go all out. I agree with you, Sarah. I don't think they're all that fancy, but I think Michael's comment is on point too. The menus are not designed for frequent repeat cruisers, right? And so maybe we've cruised too much, Tracy? I don't wanna actually say that. Did I just say that out loud?
Ask Craig.
Just yeah, well, no, they sell even more. But Taryn is hoping for a refresh. She does like
Yeah.
the dishes that are different than what she would cook at home, though. And then we did have a comment about the pirate menu. We had a comment, "Does anyone like the pirate menu?"
I haven't
The
met anybody.
the Lost and I actually do know a couple of people who like the
Do you
pirate
really?
menu.
I
Yeah.
have never anybody who likes the pirate
But
menu, not
but Sarah
one.
but Sarah's saying she loves the Treasure of the Sea pasta, but the rest of it she doesn't really, like.
Yeah.
And then, this is a funny one, Wesley saying, "If it's a popular culinary trick, make it sound fancy without actually being
Well, if
fancy."
it just
Yeah.
sounds fancy, then I must be missing out because if I look at it and I don't know what they're saying, I'm not gonna order it. So
Yeah.
that's my issue. I gotta figure
Yeah.
that out, I guess.
Yeah, well, and Matthew saying the pirate menu is good, and then CT is saying for the families that don't do Palo, Remy, or Enchanté, the elevated menus play better. That's absolutely true. It's like
That's
a
true.
it's trying to be somewhere in between being like what you would
Right,
cook at home, what you would get at like a local, I don't know, chain steak restaurant, right? But
right.
trying to elevate it a little bit. And Matthew saying there's a lot of haters on the pirate menu, but he enjoys it. Yes.
It's okay, Matthew, you can be wrong.
No, I think that the pirate menu I actually think the pirate menu post-pandemic, because they did update it, is a lot better
The
than the
old one? Yeah,
old
the
one.
old one's even
Yeah.
worse. You're
And
right,
Bridget
Carrie.
listen, Bridget's saying she likes the pirate menu is the
Oh,
best
that's
squid
2
dinner on
of
her
you.
first fish
Wow.
cruise. There you go. See, I tell you. And Sarah likes one dish on there, so that
Yeah,
counts too. So Tracy,
jeez.
we are there are others who disagree on the pirate
Yeah,
menu. Well, let's talk about spaces, because they're obviously on the treasure, we've got all these new, very intensely themed spaces. And on
right.
fantasy, we've got more of the classic ocean liner with some theming in some spaces. I guess let's start with actually dining first, because
Okay.
dining is a great differentiator. On the fantasy, for those who haven't been, you've got three rotational dining restaurants, just like on all the other ships, but you have specifically Royal Court, which is your sort of princess themed restaurant with that's very subtle in its theming.
Mhm.
It feels very royal. It's the fanciest of the spaces,
But there's
but it's
Disney in your face.
right. There's no you don't have, like, IP all over the place. It's very
Right.
understated. It's definitely sort of royal and princess themed. And the wait staff's new particularly their new uniforms are really, really nice, I would say, better than the old ones. Then you, of course, have Animator's Palette, which is we'll call it your show restaurant. You're gonna have, uh depending upon your itinerary, you might have the Crush show or you might have Animation Magic. The Crush show is where Crush talks to you like seeing Crush in the parks. Animation Magic is I'll just say it's where your drawings come alive. Now I'll leave it at that for those who haven't actually gotten a chance to do it. Um, and then the third restaurant is probably the least themed, called Enchanted Garden. It's just this pretty garden theme, and that's the one we were talking about earlier that still has chafing dishes from a buffet that they don't do anymore.
Yeah, they
That
don't use it at all anymore, which is
yeah.
so silly.
And Sarah, I saw she was commenting earlier. Here it is. I wonder if they'll add a show to Enchanted Garden at some point. I hope so, but I don't know if that's
Since
coming.
they didn't take the steam tables and stuff off the Dream, I kind of feel like I would be surprised if they took them off the Fantasy, just because they generally do the
Yep.
same thing over and over again, so
Yeah, or really similar. Well, and so Wesley's saying he loves a lightly but smartly themed restaurant. So Wesley, you probably really like then the restaurants, I would say,
yeah.
on the fantasy, because they are all lightly but smartly themed, except for animators, which is more heavily themed. So the difference between, of course, on the treasure and on the dream class, but also on the magic class is exactly that. You've got
Yeah,
on the treasure and on the wish, you've got much more, you got heavy theming in 2 of 3 restaurants.
yeah,
On the older ships, you've got only, I'd say, heavy theming in 1 of 3 restaurants on each of them because they all have a Royal Court, Royal Palace, Lumiere's, Triton's are all similar. They do have theming, but it's more understated. And then you've got Enchanted Garden on the Dream class, and oh, I guess you do have more theming on the you because you have Tiana's and Rapunzel. So you've got because of
right.
their dry
Yeah, that's
docks,
true.
you've got yeah, actually you've got 2 out of 3 on some of the ships, but Dream class being the least amount of theming. Tracy, do you prefer a more themed restaurant or do you prefer a more, you know, lightly themed restaurant?
Well, here, if I'm choosing between the Wish and the Treasure, I will pick the Treasure because I felt like the shows
No, not between
were
the Wish and Treasure. No,
right.
no.
Well, just
Let's talk between oh,
I'm leading you somewhere. Give me
okay,
because
gotcha.
so basically, the Wish is too loud for me. All
Mhm.
the shows in the Wish are too loud. They're too in your face. I can't have a conversation with the person beside me or the person across from me. When we were on the Treasure and like the Coco, we could still have a conversation, and we were right next to the stage. So I appreciated that of the Treasure. The Fantasy I appreciated more because other than the Crush show, which is intermittent, and the Animator show, which is intermittent, there's no show. So you're having dinner with your family and your friends and you can converse and you can, talk about your day or whatever. So I mean, I love the shows. Don't get me wrong. I do love music. I do love a good musical. I just am not 100% sure that I need the hardcore show like they have on The Wish for
Mhm.
my dinner. I can go to the theater to get that. But so that's I mean, that might be a hot take, but I kind of prefer just being able to sit and converse and talk about what we did and, so
Yeah,
enjoy the staff. Like on
yeah.
the fantasy, we got to talk a lot to our wait staff who were fabulous. Shout out Boris and Gwen. Um,
Yeah, no,
so
that's actually a really good point. If you do want to get to know your wait staff, both the Wish and the Treasure suffer from this, which is
yeah,
just having more shows, right? Even if you're doing Magic or Wonder, even though you do have animators and you have a Tiana's and Rapunzel's, you don't have them the Rapunzel's and Tiana's, you typically only have a show one night, so it's not
right.
as much interference. Whereas, Taryn is saying here, you got 4 dinner shows on the Treasure, and they're all
Yeah.
loud and louder and longer. Although I'd say that the Marvel one, the second night Marvel one, more is less intrusive than the first night Marvel one.
Yes, I would agree.
Yeah, but it definitely is a preference there. There was a huge difference between dining on Wish and Treasure and dining on the rest of the fleet. I do think there is more if you like a dinner show aspect, then Wish and Treasure are going to be more your thing. Of course, depending
Right,
upon if you don't like it really loud, then that might change your opinion.
right.
But I do think the original 4, and particularly Dream Class would be great for the quieter dinner person. So
Right,
dream or
and I
fantasy.
would say if you've got little kids who need to be distracted during dinner, maybe
Mhm.
the shows are the way to go for you.
Yep.
Our kids aren't little anymore, so it's just us traveling at this point, and so for us, just being able to, sit and have a conversation and, enjoy the dinner and have a drink and whatever, that for us is, I think, at least for me, I guess I can't, speak for the guy upstairs, um but I appreciated that, and especially because we were sitting at a large table with,
Mhm.
we had a pretty big party, to be able to talk to people on the other end of the table. It was just easier on the fantasy than it was on the treasure or it would be on the wish for sure.
And Wesley saying overall he's with you. He says his kids would disagree. We've got Sarah commenting that the last time they were on the Wonder, Tiana's was very loud, and with
So,
her dad, who's hard of hearing, it made dinner. Yeah, it made dinner hard.
yeah,
Yeah, that is absolutely true. And I will say that is the same issue on the Wish in Arendelle presents in Coco on the Treasure, and same with Marvel on the Treasure as in Wish, but maybe is slightly better, right? Like I'm gonna
yeah,
say as far as between Wish and Treasure, Treasure's a little bit better on the sight lines and the volume and the way the show is a little bit more intermittent than continuous, particularly Arendelle versus Coco, but
Yeah.
both are pretty intrusive. So magically Vanessa is saying she doesn't need a show every night. She feel they rush service so as not to interfere with the show. This is true. This is one thing
Yes.
we noticed on we had to order everything at once on the treasure, including our dessert because all the time because there was a show that was going to interrupt dinner, and so they
Yep.
needed to know everything from the start. Whereas on the fantasy, the only night where we needed to do that was in animators, but only really animation magic. We didn't have to do that
Yes.
even for Crush Night because Crush Night is while it does have a show, it's a little bit less, again, a little less intrusive than animation magic. So,
And on the
yeah.
treasure, they did have, which is different than the other ships that I can remember, is that the desserts were on the main menu.
Yes, you're right. That's a really good
Because
point.
we would get a separate dessert menu on all the other ships, but when we got to the treasure, when we opened up the menu the first time, we're like, "The desserts are on here, like, what is happening?" So,
Yep.
that was different for the treasure as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure it was purposeful because, like I
Yeah,
said, we basically had you had to order
yeah,
everything all at once
everything.
at the beginning and figure that out. I mean, you could change your mind, of course, and your staff would get you something else, but
Yeah.
it was certainly it was certainly a different situation. Well, let's talk about I'll talk about shows a little bit because I know you didn't go to any of the shows on the fantasy. But I know you went to the shows well, you went to the new shows on, the new show, I
Yes.
should say, on the Treasure. I know, you enjoyed Moana, but you had the
Oh,
same
yeah.
comments as Brian. You weren't as big a fan of Maui as I was. Um, I mean, I gotta tell people the shows on the fantasy are still fabulous. So I didn't go to all 3 because 'cause I've seen all 3 before, but I made sure to go to Aladdin because it had been a while since I had seen Aladdin. I wanted to go to Frozen, but then I was talked out of it. I was instead talked
Hmm.
into going to, I don't know, Meridian, I think, one night instead of going to see Frozen, by some devils on my shoulder. Um And, but I will say the fantasy, the fantasy is still doing great with,
Oh,
I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Believe. There are people who love Believe. That's the one with the man, the flower, and the daughter. But
hot take.
but right, there are people who love that show, and God bless them. But that ship has a great production of Frozen. I think Frozen is one of the best in the fleet, and it has a really good production of Aladdin. Aladdin is fantastic if you get a really good genie. We had a really good genie, and so it was really, yeah, it was really fun to watch. So great shows across the fleet, but Treasure is number one for shows right now.
Moana
So
was ridiculous.
so good, right? And the
Yeah,
woman who
so
plays Moana, and you got a picture with her, Tracy.
I got to
Uh,
meet both of them.
yeah, oh yeah, we got to meet
The
the one who plays
younger
young
one and the older
Moana,
one, yeah,
but the one who plays older Moana, I mean, it's like
yeah,
an 8-year-old. They're supposed to be 8 and 16, and that's what's
right.
funny about it. It's not older and I mean older and younger, but they're both adults.
Yeah.
But the one who plays the older version, she's the one who sings all the songs and she's the main character, and she's yeah, just
So good.
she's a star.
And
Incredible.
having met her, she is as sweet as she can be.
Yeah.
She was there with her fiancé, and they asked us to take a picture. We just were standing by the Christmas tree, asked us to take a picture, and then I leaned over to her and I said, "Do you know Moana?" And she was like, "Yeah, I do." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, like, you were fantastic." She was so sweet, and she let us take a selfie, and
Yeah.
so it was really quite nice.
Yeah, super fun. Well, okay, so we've been through dining, we've been through shows, we gotta talk, bar spaces. I mean, the bar spaces on the fantasy were my favorite probably until Treasure came out, so I still think they're top notch. What do you think, Tracy?
Well, and again, because I am not traveling with kids, I kind of dig the vibe of having all the adult areas kind of in the same area.
Mhm.
Um, and I like the D lounge and the places where they do the bigger trivias. What's the name of the other, the tube?
Yeah.
for like, trivia. Shout out to Brian and Michael and I for winning brain teasers.
Yeah.
Um, that's great. I like those spaces. I think almost better than Sarabi on the Treasure, just because Sarabi is that 2 stories, open on the edges, kind of a thing where they can close the doors if they need to on the fantasy. And I do like you get into that area and then you can, I mean, sounds bad, but like bar hop, like
Yeah.
you know what's in that area. And when
Yeah.
you're on the
You've got
Treasure,
yeah, for
you got
those
to
who
go
don't
here and
know.
then you got to go there and you got to, yeah,
Yeah, for
it's
those who
just
don't know, the layout on the fantasy is basically all of the adult-only bar spaces except for one, which is Meridian.
Mhm.
Meridian is up where between Paulo and Remy, which is on deck 13 aft. All the rest of them are what is it? Deck 4 aft, and it's called Europa, and it's a whole district. And on the Dream, it's called the District. On the
Right.
fantasy, it's called Europa, and it's all these they're sort of themed different countries and whatnot. So the Tube is like London themed, like London subway themed. You've got Skyline, which is different city themed, and the skyscape on the screens changes as you're sitting
Behind the
there.
bar, yeah.
Yeah, you've got La Piazza, which is a Italian themed like carousel bar. You've got Ooh La La, which is a French themed champagne bar. You've got O'Gill's, which is an Irish pub. So you have you have nice theming. They're all bars, right? But it's all in one place. Whereas on the Treasure, just like on the Wish, for those who have been on the Wish or have been on the Treasure now, they're kind of spread out throughout the ship. So location is very, very different. But I will say the theming on the Treasure is more intense, right? You've got
Yeah,
because you have Haunted Mansion Parlor and you've got Scat Cat Lounge,
Skipper
you have
Society.
Skipper Society and Periscope Pub. So all of these and Sarabi, as you
Right,
mentioned, which is more of like a theater space that's also a bar
right.
space. Um, but yeah, it's those are very intensely themed, and I don't know about you, Tracy. I loved all the theming of on the Treasure.
Yeah. Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm not even like a big haunted mansion person, but it was so cool to go in there and just like kind of sit for a little bit and watch the show that happens all around you. It is immersive.
Mhm.
Where, in Europa, in the bars there, again, it's almost like the dining spaces. It's less IP themed.
Yep.
It's more generic. They're still themed for the country, or that they are,
Right.
like the furniture, matches the vibe and that sort of thing. But it's not as in your face Disney as the Haunted Mansion bar, the Skipper Society, the Periscope Pub. Not that I loved all of, I mean, we tested them all out and they were all great.
We
You
tested
know?
them all out. I love the way you say that.
Well, we
You
can't
know,
talk
it's
about it if we
for
haven't looked
science, right? It's for science, right? Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Vanessa saying she definitely prefers the adult spaces on the first 4 ships and that Sarabi has columns that block your view in quite a few places. You are right, Vanessa, but I will say the Tube does also have like sightline issues as
The
well.
polls. Yeah,
And so does in whatever the one in the Dream, I can't remember the in the District is called, but it's the same
yeah,
layout as the Tube. That has some sightline issues. So some of that is, structural stuff, right? But you're right. Sarabi definitely has some columns that block your view, as of course Luna on the Wish is the same. I think I agree. I think that space is the maybe my least of the not I like the theming of Sarabi, but that
right.
sort of layout. And because it's supposed to hold things like trivias and bingos and some other shows, it's yeah, that one is maybe my least favorite of what they did on the Wish class as compared to, you've got Azure and the Tube and Fathoms and whatever the one on the Dream is called. I think those are better. Um yeah, so definitely different layout for the bar spaces, but more intense theming. I'd say that's sort of the overall thing.
Right.
I feel like we've got to talk Aqua Duck versus Aqua Mouse now that we have very recently been on both, Tracy. That we've got Pool decks, there's lots of differences on the pool decks as
Oh,
far as
yeah.
how many number of pools and all that. Of course, Wish class has a greater number of pool, but we'll talk about I think we should talk about the adult pool spaces a little bit, because obviously they're very different on
Oh, yeah.
Dream class and Wish class. But let's start with water slide. Which one, Tracy? What's better, the mouse or the duck? It's so
Well,
hard.
I will be honest, it was too cold on the fantasy. We never quite made it to the
You
aqueduct.
didn't? I didn't
No,
realize that
because
you never did.
we were gonna do
You're a
it
wimp when it
we
comes
were
to
gonna
cold.
do it on Castaway Day, and it was so cold to me, even though it's like freezing here now and there's 2 inches of snow on the ground, but so we didn't actually get on the aqueduct. So, but I think I'm still a mouse fan.
Yeah.
I like the show, and I felt like on the Treasure, I got to see multiple shows.
Mhm.
I did get to see the Golden Egg one, and the sprayers were all working.
Mhm.
And I don't know. I think that I want themed heavily, and that I
Yeah,
like, you
I feel
know?
you. Alright, well, Sarah's
So
saying duck, Vanessa's saying duck,
okay.
uh Matthew's saying mouse is good for people with mobility issues, and he understands why Disney did it. Yeah, absolutely. I'm
Yeah.
gonna go with Tracy on this one. I have to go with the mouse now. I really like both, but now that I've been able to do
Back
them
to
like
back,
back
yeah.
to back, and so have like a closer comparison, which I've never had this close of a comparison before, like a week, a week's difference. Yeah, I gotta say I like the mouse a little bit better. I think the tubes are more comfortable and easier to get in and out of. I think the setup is nice where you're getting in and getting out at the exact same place. And yeah, I do like the show aspect, even though the water slide is a little bit longer on the
Right.
aqueduct. It's a little bit shorter on the mouse, but not a huge significant amount.
Mm.
I just like the ride better. Go
And
figure.
if you plan perfectly and you stay on the ship on Castaway Day, and then you get on there, you can sit on that Aqua Mouse
Yeah,
and just
over and over again.
they don't make you get out if there's
Yeah, you
nobody
can't
allowed.
do that. You can't do that on the duck. You have to
No,
get out and
you
climb
have to
those
climb
darn
up all those
stairs again.
stairs.
Yeah.
Right? So I was like, "Yeah, I'm good with this." We'd get to the end and he'd be like, "You wanna go again?" I'd be like, "Sure," and there we
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. Well, Wesley disagrees with us. He thinks the duck is more exciting, and Vanessa doesn't like being squirted or being in the dark. I totally understand. Listen,
Yeah, I get
there
it.
there
We don't like the Aqua Dunk, either
yeah,
one of us, and
neither of us
Michael would
likes
say that's his favorite,
and
so
Brian would say that's his favorite
yeah,
also. Neither I don't like being dropped into that
yeah,
dark, scary tube. No, and having water
terrifying.
go up my nose. So,
Yeah,
okay, but now we got to turn to the adult pool space. I don't
yeah,
want to talk too much about the family pool deck space because I think that both are great for families.
yeah,
I would say Wish class is a little bit better because you've got more smaller pools. But let's
yeah.
talk about the adult pool space because this is where there's a real big difference,
Yes.
Tracy.
Oh, yeah. So, one thing I noticed on the Fantasy was the dry dock was evident in the pool. So when we were sitting there in that little waiting area, there's paint peeling up off the bottom. So
Sure.
it's evident that they need to, do the work on that. Um, I think if I mean, like, I love the infinity pool on the Wish class ships.
Hmm.
However, I also want to lay by the pool. And
Yes.
there's no place to lay on the Wish and the Treasure. They have the seating area, and on the Treasure, I felt like the seating area was bigger between the bar and the pool area, like, we had more space than I
Oh,
believe we
really?
did in the Wish. Yes,
I
I
don't think
felt like
so. I think it's
maybe
the same.
it's just the tables are different and the
Oh,
chairs are
could
different,
be. Yeah,
but
could be.
it felt bigger. It felt like I had more room to, like, maneuver if you went up to the bar to get a drink or, like, where we were sitting, on the Treasure where we sat those days, we just kinda sat there and talked or whatever. It felt bigger, even if
Mhm.
it might just be the furniture that they're using. But again, for me, I'm probably gonna say the dream class because I like to be able to be lounging in a lounge chair,
Yeah.
maybe get some sun, maybe not get some sun, depending on where the ship is, where the sun is. Maybe I'm in the sun, maybe Michael's in the shade, but yet we're still sitting next to each other. And then
Yeah.
you get hot, you want to jump in the pool, or you want to walk over and get a drink and you want to keep your feet in the water. They've got I don't think I saw a single person sitting on those bar stools, like, at the bar there, but, I still think it's a cool idea.
Yeah. I absolutely agree. Matthew's agreeing too. He loves the adult areas on the fantasy, and he's ready for his fantasy cruise in 4 weeks.
Yay!
Like, the the pool area on the dream and the fantasy has absolutely better adult pool area, and then you've also got, the sort of the Satellite Falls area, so you've got, like, a lot more space for adults to lounge, to get in a pool too. Because even though you have that pretty infinity pool on the Wish class ships, you have much bigger pools for the adults on the Dream class, on both the Dream and the Fantasy. So, yeah, I think that while it's showing its wear and it is going to be, I'm sure, they'll do the little just it's the little paint things. It's not anything big. They'll
Right,
do
no,
that stuff in its dry dock, but it is definitely a better adult pool area than on the Wish class, no question. And Matthew, you're 100% right on this, but the Wish class has the best main deck area, meaning um the family deck, pool deck areas. We've got a question about, how do the cocktail menus compare on the Treasure versus the Fantasy?
ooh,
I mean, on the pool decks, it's the same. You can get all the same cocktails on the pool decks. I will say the differences are really in the themed bar
I would
spaces.
say it's in the IP. It's
Yeah, so
definitely
so in the themed bar spaces, you have special themed menus. That doesn't mean you can't get other stuff, but they really are pushing more those themed menus. Haunted
mhm,
Mansion Parlor, I'm not sure you can get stuff outside of what
yeah,
what's on their menu versus on the Dream and the Fantasy, you can get any drink really in any bar and they
yeah,
will, make it for you. So that's I would say that's the major difference. Um, and then, oh, here's one other thing that Sarah was mentioning, the location of the Cove
yes.
Cafe. Location of
Oh,
Cove Cafe on the Dream class is right next to that adult pool
cool.
deck. It's very centrally located, as is the adult pool deck. The only downside to that is you do often have kids walking through and sometimes having kids walking into Cove with their parents to get a coffee. I personally don't really mind this as long as they're not being loud and bothering the adults or taking up, adult spaces for a long period of time. So
Right,
if they're hanging out there when they're not supposed to be hanging out there, that would bother me, but I have no problem with people, walking
right,
through
walking
and
through doesn't bother me at all. Yeah,
yeah,
I've got
exactly.
nothing.
Exactly. And then we've got another question, a compare question, Cabanas or
Oh,
Marceline? I'm gonna say Marceline, and I'm gonna put it out
okay.
there and say it's they're not that different. I don't have a
Yeah,
huge this is not a strong preference, but I say Marceline for a couple reasons. One, it's got that really big coffee bar right at the front, whereas in Cabanas, there is a coffee bar, but it's all the way at the back and it's really far away. And two, most of the food in Marceline Market is crew served rather than guest served,
mhm,
meaning you don't have everybody's grubby hands touching all the tongs and the spoons.
right.
And so for germs and particularly for norovirus outbreaks, I believe that Marceline is safer and
Sure,
better for
yeah,
everyone.
and as an RN, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
So,
We got agreement from Vanessa,
yeah,
we've got agreement from, agreement from Taryn because she likes that they serve the food, she's
mhm,
agreeing with us, and then Accessible Adventures with Andrew saying Marceline for the quiet spaces hidden behind the
yes.
hand washing yes, that's a good point, there are some
Yeah,
kind of
there's a little, like,
tucked
behind
away.
the wall that people don't actually see or back there, they walk past it and they're just looking frantically looking for a table, but if you go behind that wall, there's, like, another room back there, and
Yeah.
sometimes you can luck out and find a spot. The other thing that I liked better on the Treasure than the Fantasy was the omelet station.
Oh, yes.
I felt like they had a bigger area, like they had 2 sides, and then they're yeah, I don't know if they're doing this on all the ships, but this was the first we had done where you order your omelet and they give you a buzzer.
Yes.
And that's the Treasure was the first that I had ever gotten the buzzer
Oh, yeah,
that I can remember.
they did it on the fantasy too, with the buzzer,
Yeah.
but yeah, it may be new-ish. I didn't used to get omelets, so I don't really remember. Now I get like to go get fresh eggs now as well, so, yeah, I have to agree with you there. I think that
I
that
think they
is
did that because people would order their omelet and then they would just stand there
yes.
waiting for their omelet.
And they
and
would
it
clog up
became
yeah,
congested, and so now you go order that first, you grab your buzzer, and they told me, "Hold on to this. Do not set it down because it's not gonna make a noise, it's only gonna buzz."
yeah.
Like,
Oh,
"Okay."
Linda's giving us real-time info. They were handing out numbers in July, which remember they used to hand out the
Oh,
number
the
and you put it on your
yeah,
table?
okay,
On the fantasy, so that
okay.
must be
So
yeah, it
that's
must
new.
be new to the fantasy. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I
and the
liked it
server
because then I could go down the rest of the buffet, I could grab my drink, I could try and look for a table, and I wasn't just standing there waiting for it, and then when it went off, I went back, I handed it to them. There's a number on the buzzer, they hand you your omelet, and off you go. So
yeah,
I'll go with Marceline on that one too, for that
awesome.
alone.
Yeah. All right, well, I wanna round this out by saying, because we're at an hour, so I'm gonna round this out by saying activities across the ships are
Mhm.
all very similar with a
Yeah,
couple of exceptions, which have to do with spaces that exist on the treasure that don't exist on the fantasy. And then of course we mentioned sage and coriander. We talked about them on
yeah,
a couple of our treasure shows. They do some special shows in the grand hall and in Sarabi that don't exist on the rest of the fleet, that are really new. And so I'd say, overall in activities, they're really similar across the
mhm.
fleet. You've got your trivias, you've got your towel folding and your napkin folding and your origami and your crafts and all that kind of stuff. So,
Karaoke.
yeah, karaoke. You've got, and of course, match your maid is still across all the ships, and the adult activities really, really similar with great staff and crew. So across the fleet, you have fantastic service, fantastic activities. Tracy, I got to round this out by asking you, which one now is your favorite ship? Now you've been
I've
on
been
all
on all
6 ships.
I know,
So
right?
we have a big hero 6. We've got a big hero 6 for me and a big hero 6 for Tracy.
Yep.
Tracy, which one is your favorite ship right now? You're getting on tomorrow. It's going to be a 7
Oh,
night. The 7 night is the great equalizer. You're getting on a
right.
ship tomorrow. They're going to the Eastern Caribbean and it's a 7 night cruise, but it's any of the Disney fleet. Which ship are you going on?
Oh gosh. I mean, and one space you didn't talk about was Rainforest Room and Spa, and
Oh,
the
well,
Rainforest
if
Room.
that's the tiebreaker, then
Well, I mean, if
let us
that's
know.
the tiebreaker, then the fantasy wins because the Rainforest Room in the fantasy is greater than the Rainforest Room in the treasure because of the outdoor space.
Oh my goodness. Oh,
Because of
well,
the outdoor space.
you
I
don't
mean,
like the outdoor space? I'm
no, I
confused.
do like the outdoor space.
Well, then the
The
fantasy
outdoor
can't
space
win.
on the
You mean the
fantasy,
treasure?
isn't it the
Oh,
one that
that
has the
outdoor I thought you were talking about the outdoor space that has the hot tubs in the middle, or are you talking about the balcony space? Both have
no,
outdoor
like
space.
like when you go, maybe I'm talking about the treasure. Gosh, am I getting them all mixed up? Oh my gosh. See, it doesn't matter which ship I'm on. Doesn't matter.
The
Is
tre
it?
so
Mhm.
the treasure and the wish have the outdoor
Oh, okay.
space
I got it.
that has, like, the 3 hot tubs and the
Right.
swinging
Okay, so
chairs
it's the
and stuff.
treasure then.
Yeah.
'Cause I
Okay.
'cause I like to go out on those big swings.
Okay, so the treasure it takes it for Tracy is
Yep.
her new favorite ship, and the tiebreaker, because she likes them
I
both
have
so
to
much.
pick one.
Yeah, alright. Okay.
What
Well,
about you?
oh, it's the treasure. It's the treasure now. It's my new favorite ship. Absolutely. Well, the wonder is it just depends. If I'm saying concierge, I want to be on the wonder. Let's just put it there. How about that? So anyway, I love them both. But we had fantastic cruises on both the treasure and the
Amazing.
fantasy, some great park stays. Of course, the Kennedy Space Center in between. Cannot recommend the Kennedy Space Center highly
Oh,
enough.
yeah.
Although, of course, it was a weekend during a holiday, and so it was madness, and we didn't get to see nearly as much as I would have liked. But with that, I will just say thank you to Tracy for co-hosting this show with me. I so appreciate it. I got to mention that it's, the new year. Happy 2025 again to everyone who's been listening to us, whether you came to us last week or you came to us 5 years ago when we started this thing in
Or number
2020.
1.
Tracy is our number one fan. We will not forget that. Our next live episode, I got to tell you all the crazy thing about this. Our next live episode, which is going to be next week, same time, 8:30 Eastern, 5:30 Pacific, next Monday, the 13th, is episode number 500.
I missed it by like 2
100.
episodes.
So please join us next week. I don't remember what we're going to be talking about, but I'm sure we'll have a great show for you. So please join us next week for our 500th episode. And with that, I will just say smooth sailing for 2025, and may all your sailings be great ones. Take care, everyone, and have a wonderful start to this new year.